Tonight, foster care. A look at how authorities in Fort St. John handled a case of child neglect. BC wildfire, the state of emergency in the town of Lytton, and the rodeo's returning. The North Peace Rodeo comes back to the energetic city. Good evening and thank you very much for joining us. We begin tonight with a scathing look at how authorities handled a disturbing case of child neglect. We first told you last year about 3 siblings removed from their home in Fort St. John. Well, now CTV News has obtained a report that provides insight into how police and ministry officials failed to protect the siblings. Michelle Bernaro has more in this exclusive story and a warning. Some people may find the details disturbing.
There are precious moments like these when 3 young siblings find joy in simple play.
When they are happy and feel safe and loved, it really makes all of this so worth it.
But this relative, who is also the children's guardian, says the happy times are punctuated by the dark consequences of children who've suffered years of neglect.
It should never have gotten to where it did, ever.
We can't report the family's name or show their faces, but relatives describe the children as being feral when they were first taken into care.
The conditions were horror. That's all I could describe it as. They were living in feces, eating feces. There were malnutrition.
Family members told CTV News last year the children had been locked in their rooms daily, were nonverbal, and not potty trained. An investigation by the Office of BC's Ombudsperson lays out the ministry's failings. It found 6 documented reports to social services raising concerns about neglect involving the children. The ministry received the first of these reports approximately 4 years before it took action to ensure that the children were protected from harm. The probe found some reports to social services were screened out at least partially due to communications issues, and it appears the ministry failed repeatedly to follow its own policies, including not doing an in-person visit following reports of neglect and failing to take action because the family moved, even though the ministry received another report of concern just 12 days later. RCMP visited the family's home on 2 occasions, including in May 2023.
The RCMP member found one of the children down the road with no clothing on.
But the report says social services didn't take action because police attended their home and informed the ministry they had no concerns. The siblings were finally taken into care in December 2023 after their own parents told social workers they could not look after the children. It was then a ministry worker attended their home and found extensive evidence of neglect.
There's been no accountability. No one's been held accountable as far as the ministry, the RCMP, nor the parents.
I've asked over and over and over again, who's going to be held responsible for what's happened to these kids?
CTV News repeatedly requested an interview with the Minister of Children and Family Development, but we were told she had no availability for 4 weeks. Instead, her office issued a statement saying it could not talk about the specifics of the case due to confidentiality. CTV News also reached out to the RCMP, who said there is an ongoing and complex investigation into the care of the children and whether it meets a threshold of a criminal offense. Meanwhile, the ministry says it has made changes, including updating policy, so when the ministry receives multiple calls, it prompts a supervisor to take another look at the situation. And that following a special audit, staff have recently received additional training on screening child protection reports. But family members say years of inaction by the ministry have had profound and lifetime impacts on the children.
The system failed not only the kids, but the family itself, because had someone stepped in and maybe said, this is what has to be done. You have to be able to, get counseling, you have to do this, you have to get medical treatment if you're having issues. Maybe they could have still been a family and we wouldn't be where we are. And the kids would have gotten early intervention help, but that didn't happen. And it only got worse and worse and worse and worse.
Their guardian saying she has concerns not just for these kids, but for other children whose suffering may also have been ignored.
I wonder and worry all the time how many other children are locked in their bedrooms not being checked on.
Michelle Bernaro, CTV News, Vancouver.
The most concerning wildfire in British Columbia is now near Lytton. The town is under a local state of emergency almost 4 years to the day since fire almost destroyed the community. CTV's Kathy Lee has more, along with weather warnings across Western Canada.
The Nakia Creek wildfire is the one that's currently threatening the village of Lytton, and it's currently under 6 hectares in size.
We have moved it to the status of being held overnight, and so really not expecting it to grow outside its current boundaries.
Officials say the fire was ignited by humans and started on Monday, which was the 4-year anniversary of the devastating wildfire that destroyed the village and killed 2 people, and residents are still traumatized by that fire. And there is also another wildfire of concern in the area. This one is the Eisman Creek fire, which is 25 hectares and expected to grow.
We want the public to be able to enjoy their summer in the beautiful province that we live in, but we do ask them to just practice caution when they're recreating outside.
The prairie is also experiencing hot and dry temperatures. There are heat warnings for parts of Saskatchewan and Alberta. In this province, some areas expected to get above 35 degrees. And following the heat, there will be thunderstorms.
This is where your wildfire risk can be elevated because you're amplifying the fuel sources, you're drying out that material, and then you're looking at that convective activity with strong wind coming through that same region.
The heat wave's not just increasing the wildfire threat, it's also making it uncomfortable for people. The good news, though, is Environment Canada says it should only last a couple days. Kathy Lee, CTV News.
The housing minister was in Delta this morning outlining new steps the province is taking to get more homes built faster. The changes will create more flexible and extended payment timelines for home builders. It gives developers 4 years instead of 2 to pay fees and extends the use of on-demand surety bonds province-wide. The financial tool frees up a developer's access to credit and is currently used in 40 municipalities across BC. The changes are set to take effect on January the 1st, 2026. After months of waiting, would-be parents in BC can now apply for a free round of in vitro fertilization. The publicly funded program will cover up to $19,000 per person for 1 round of IVF. Patients must be covered by MSP and be between the ages of 18 and 41 when they apply. Applications need to be submitted by a doctor. The program was announced during last year's provincial budget, which allocated $68 million in funding over 2 years. The province of Alberta is officially creating its own police service.
We have formally created the Alberta Sheriff's Police Service to be headquartered right here in Calgary. Threats to public safety are always shifting, and the federal government could decide to redirect the RCMP away from contract policing. So Alberta's government is preparing and acting instead of waiting and reacting.
Premier Danielle Smith says the new service is not meant to replace the RCMP, but to work alongside existing police forces in the province. The sheriffs will be run separately from the government with civilian oversight. Smith says over 80% of Albertans are currently being served by municipal police, not the RCMP. A man jailed for his role in the Coutts border blockade has been granted bail while he appeals his conviction and his sentence. An Alberta appeal court judge says Chris Carbert does not pose a threat to the public safety and is unlikely to commit a criminal offense if released from custody. Last fall, a jury found Carbert and Anthony Olenek guilty of mischief over $5,000 and possession of a weapon dangerous to the public peace. They were each given prison sentences of 6.5 years. Olenek was also convicted of possessing a pipe bomb. The blockade tied up traffic at the Canadian-U.S. border crossing in southern Alberta for 2 weeks in early 2022. It was just one of several nationwide protests against COVID-19 rules and vaccine mandates. Free trade within this country by Canada Day was a cornerstone of Mark Carney's election campaign. And while some experts say he's lived up to his promise, others warn the work is far from over. CTV's Colton Prale has more.
158 years ago, a few provinces bet on a big idea, that they'd be stronger together than they ever could be apart.
Working together to build one economy, Mark Carney was graded on his economic cornerstone. In its annual report card, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business gave the federal government a B for its work on internal trade, but would upgrade to an A after it dropped all federal free trade exemptions Monday. Ontario and Nova Scotia are the top performing provinces, while Quebec and Newfoundland are the worst.
that's not all of the work. It's really the policy changes and the regulatory work and the standards changes that has to come about for free trade to actually take place.
One of the biggest moves forward was in Carney's Major Projects Bill, C5, legislating a push for increased mutual recognition, where Ottawa will accept one province's standards as equal across the country. Provinces like Ontario, Manitoba, and New Brunswick have already moved to adopt mutual recognition for some alcohol sales, interprovincial labor, and more.
The dialogue, the exchange of data and know-how actually propels towards even better common platforms.
But others are worried.
They're doing this mutual recognition in a way that is going to risk a race to the bottom. So basically the lowest standards in any province being accepted as good enough.
In trucking, that's a concern. Instead, they're hoping the urgency around internal trade will lead to harmonized regulations for oversized cargo, driving restrictions, and rest stops on major highways.
If we want the inputs to go and the freight and the materials to do these nation building projects, this is another foundational piece. It's not rocket science to get this fixed.
While Ottawa focuses on reducing regulations, some economists say the best way to help Canadian trade is to build roads, rails, and ports as quickly as possible. Colton Prail, CTV News, Ottawa.
Companies who already pay the federal digital services tax will have to wait for new legislation to be passed before they can get a refund. The first payment was due Monday. It could have cost American companies like Amazon and Uber billions of dollars. Earlier this week, Canada dropped the tax just hours before it came into effect in a bid to restart trade negotiations with the United States. The CRA collected some revenue from the tax before Ottawa's reversal. MPs will have to approve legislation formally revoking the tax when Parliament returns from its summer break in order for taxpayers to get their money back. Canada's environment ministers are gathering in Yellowknife for meetings this week. The ministers from Alberta and Ontario have both been vocal about putting an end to federal policies they say weaken economies and do not help the environment. Alberta's Environment Minister Rebecca Schultz and her counterpart from Ontario have written to the federal government. They're requesting an urgent discussion around scrapping federal policies they call punitive. They say that includes discussions on repealing the Impact Assessment Act, and it also includes the Physical Activities Regulations, Clean Electricity Regulations, and Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act and associated regulations. The Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment meeting in Yellowknife runs until Friday. For the first time in at least 2 years, it appears the United States is losing jobs. New data shows the U.S. shed 33,000 jobs from the private sector in June. The prospect of job losses raises concerns that uncertainty and President Trump's tariff policies may be causing employers to freeze their hiring. A verdict was returned today after 13 hours of deliberation in the high-profile case against rap mogul Sean Diddy Combs. The jury acquitted him on sex trafficking and racketeering charges, but convicted him for prostitution. With more, here's Adrian Gobriel.
Waving and smiling, the Combs family exited this New York City federal court. As protesters came face to face with supporters of Sean Diddy Combs, emotions running at a fever pitch, just moments after the jury delivered their split verdict. Delivered on the third day of deliberations, the jury of 8 men and 4 women declared the 55-year-old Combs not guilty of 1 count of racketeering conspiracy and 2 counts of sex trafficking by force, but guilty of the lesser charges of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. Combs, who's already been incarcerated for 10 months, could still face considerable prison time. At sentencing, each of the prostitution transportation charges carry as much as 10 years behind bars. While Combs' lawyer declined to comment, multiple criminal law experts are declaring today a victory for the former hip-hop mogul.
It's absolutely a win. The defense took a really big gamble going to trial on this case.
The prosecution called 34 witnesses to the stand, multiple ex-girlfriends, including singer Cassie Ventura, who claimed that Combs forced her to engage in sexual encounters called, quote, freak-offs and hotel nights. Jurors watched this 2016 hotel video of Combs dragging and kicking her. Ventura's lawyer stopped short of calling today a victory for his client.
We're pleased that he's finally been held responsible for 2 federal crimes, something that he's never faced in his life. He still faces substantial jail time. Of course, we would have liked to have seen a conviction on the sex crimes in RICO, but we understand beyond a reasonable doubt is a high standard.
With this decision, Combs avoids a possible life sentence. Moments after the verdict was read out, his family began to cheer in the courtroom as the one-time music star appeared to fall to his knees in prayer. Adrian Gobriel, CTV News, Washington.
Well, there's been an explosion at a fireworks warehouse in Northern California. The explosion sent a column of smoke into the sky near Sacramento. Firefighters say the flames from the explosion spread a half a kilometer away, forcing some people from their homes. At this point, we don't know if there are any injuries. Officials say the warehouse is licensed to handle fireworks. The cause is now under investigation. All right, please do stay tuned. Noah Abel will be right back with weather, including a tornado warning for Prince George that lasted for just over 10 minutes. That story coming up after the break.